The morning mist hung heavy over the surface of Lake Serenity, a mirror-flat expanse of water that had been in the Miller family for 3 generations. I sat on my back porch, sipping coffee and enjoying the silence that usually defined my 5-acre slice of heaven. My property was an anomaly, a private, deeded lakefront estate that existed long before the Whispering Pines. Luxury subdivision sprouted up next door. The peace was shattered by the rhythmic thud-thud of a clipboard hitting a car door. I looked up to see Beatrice B. Vanderhouse, the self-appointed president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. Stepping out of her pristine white SUV, she was dressed in what I called her war uniform, a stiff beige pantsuit and pearls, with her blonde bob sprayed into a helmet that could deflect shrapnel. "Arthur!" she called out, her voice like a siren cutting through the fog. She didn't wait for an invitation. She simply marched toward my private dock, followed by a younger couple in expensive-looking athleisure. I stood up, my knees creaking. "Morning, Beatrice. You're early for a Saturday, and you're on private property." Beatrice didn't even look at me. She gestured toward the water with a manicured hand. "And here we have the jewel of the community. As I mentioned in the brochure, the deep water access is perfect for the motorized craft your lifestyle demands. We'll be installing the communal boat launch, right where that old wooden shack is currently standing. The old wooden shack was my grandfather's fishing hut. The communal boat launch didn't exist." "Excuse me?" I said, walking down the lawn. "Beatrice, what are you talking about?" She finally turned to me, offering a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Arthur, dear, don't be difficult. I'm showing the Millers, no relation to you. Of course, the expanded amenities for Phase 4. They are very interested in the premium lot next door, provided they have the promised lake access." The couple, looking a bit sheepish, nodded. "It's a beautiful lake, Mr. Miller," the husband said. "Beatrice told us the HOA recently acquired the water rights to ensure unified community aesthetics." My blood began to simmer. This wasn't the first time Beatrice had overstepped, but it was the most audacious. Over the last 6 months, she had sent me citations for my overgrown wildflowers, which were a protected bee sanctuary, and fines for my gravel driveway not being paved in Sahara sand asphalt. I had ignored them because my property was legally outside the HOA's jurisdiction. "Beatrice," I said, my voice low and steady, "I've told you a dozen times. This lake is private. The property line ends at the fence you keep trying to hide with those hydrangeas. I haven't sold any rights, and I certainly haven't joined your club." Beatrice let out a patronizing titter. "Arthur, we've discussed this. In the modern era, a private lake is an eyesore and a liability. The board has already voted to incorporate this parcel into the master plan. It's for the greater good of the property values. Now, if you'll excuse us, we need to inspect the shoreline for the new retaining wall." She turned back to the couple. "Follow me. We'll look at the spot for the clubhouse." I watched, stunned, as she led them across my grass toward the water's edge. She wasn't just being a nuisance anymore. She was actively attempting to sell the use of my land to prospective buyers to inflate her own neighborhood's prestige. The next few days were a blur of activity. I contacted my lawyer, Sarah, who confirmed what I already knew. "Arthur, your deed is ironclad. She's essentially committing fraud by promising your land to these buyers. But until she actually tries to break ground, it's a civil dispute. She's already bringing surveyors on the property when I'm at the grocery store," I told her. "My neighbor, Charlie, saw them yesterday. They're marking trees with orange ribbon. Keep a log," Sarah advised. "And Arthur, don't do anything rash." I hung up the phone and looked out the window. A large truck was backing into the cul-de-sac at the edge of my property. 2 men got out and started unloading. A "coming soon" Whispering Pines private beach and club sign. That was the breaking point. Beatrice wasn't just a Karen with a clipboard. She was a land pirate. She was banking on the fact that I was an old man who would eventually fold under the pressure of her legal-sounding jargon and constant harassment. She had underestimated how much I loved that water. My father had taught me to swim there. I had scattered my wife's ashes near the weeping willow on the north bank. This wasn't just real estate. It was my life. I spent the afternoon in my workshop. I hadn't been a master welder for 40 years for nothing. The following Saturday was the Whispering Pines Summer Gala and Open House. Beatrice had spent weeks hyping it up on social media. There were balloons, a catering tent, and dozens of potential buyers looking to move into the high-priced suburb. The centerpiece of her pitch was the lakefront tour. I woke up at 5:00 a.m. I drove my old tractor down to the primary access point, the narrow strip of land between the public road and my lake, which happened to be the only way for a vehicle or a large group to reach the water without trekking through dense woods. I had spent the week preparing. I installed 4 heavy-duty steel bollards, sunk 3 feet deep into concrete. Between them, I hung a massive, industrial-grade gate I'd fabricated in the shop. It wasn't just a gate. It was a statement. It was painted a vibrant eyesore orange, and in the center I had welded a plate that read, "Private property. No HOA access. Trespassers will be prosecuted." I wrapped a heavy galvanized chain around the posts and secured it with a high-security disc lock. Then I sat on my porch and waited. At 11 a.m., the parade began. Beatrice appeared at the top of the hill, leading a group of about 20 people. She was mid-sentence, her voice projecting with practiced charisma, and as we approached the shoreline, "You'll see the site of our future promenade. We believe in a boundless community where nature and luxury—" She stopped dead. The orange gate glowed in the sunlight. It looked like a barricade at a military installation. I stood up and walked down the hill, hands in my pockets. "Morning, everyone!" Lovely day for a walk on the public sidewalk. Beatrice's face turned a shade of purple. I didn't know the human skin could achieve. "Arthur! What is the meaning of this? This monstrosity?" "It's a gate, Beatrice," I said clearly, so the whole group could hear. "On my property. To keep people from trespassing on my private lake." "Open it this instant!" she shrieked, dropping the gracious host act. "We have a scheduled tour. I have investors here. You are violating the community standards." "I'm not in your community," I reminded her. "And as for the tour, you're currently standing on the edge of my lot. If you take one more step past that orange line I painted on the asphalt, you're trespassing." One of the potential buyers, a man in a sharp suit, stepped forward. "Excuse me, ma'am. You told us this lake was part of the HOA package. You said the dues covered the maintenance of this beach. It's a legal formality in progress." Beatrice stammered, sweating through her beige suit. "Arthur is just being a difficult neighbor. We are in the process of an eminent domain acquisition." That was a blatant lie. "Is that right?" I asked. I pulled out my phone. "Because I have my lawyer on speakerphone right now, and she'd love to hear about this acquisition." Beatrice lunged for the gate, grabbing the bars and shaking them. "You can't do this! You're ruining the aesthetic. This gate is an illegal structure." "Actually," I said, "I got the permit for the fence on Tuesday. It's perfectly legal. What isn't legal is you selling access to my water to these nice people." Beatrice didn't listen. She turned to the 2 security guards. She'd hired for the gala, basically 2 college kids in staff polo shirts. "Break it! Get a bolt cutter from the maintenance shed and cut this chain, now!" The kids looked at each other, then at me. They didn't move. "That would be a mistake," I said, "because I've already called the sheriff's department. They're on their way to discuss the fraudulent lakefront brochures you've been handing out." Beatrice lost it. She began screaming about property values and uncooperative relics like me. She actually picked up a decorative rock from the landscaping and hurled it at the gate. Clang! At that moment, 2 patrol cars pulled into the cul-de-sac, their lights flashing. The gala came to a grinding halt. The prospective buyers began to scatter, sensing a legal nightmare in the making. The man in the suit looked at Beatrice with pure disgust. "My firm doesn't appreciate being lied to. Mrs. Vanderhouse, consider our offer withdrawn." Deputy Miller, again no relation, though he'd fished on my lake as a kid, stepped out of his cruiser. "All right, what's the commotion?" "Beatrice, why are you screaming at a gate? He's kidnapped the lake," she yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "He's blocking access to HOA common ground." The deputy looked at the map I had ready for him. He looked at the orange gate. Then he looked at the "coming soon" sign Beatrice had illegally placed on my grass. "Beatrice," the deputy said with a sigh, "we've been over this. This is Arthur's land. You've been warned about trespassing before. And now I've got reports from these folks here that you've been taking deposit fees for a lake club that doesn't exist on land you don't own. Beatrice's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I was going to use the funds to buy him out. It's a visionary strategy. It's called fraud, Beatrice, I said. The deputy didn't arrest her right. They usually don't for Karens unless they get violent, but he did write her a massive citation for trespassing and ordered her to remove all HOA signage from my property immediately. He also informed her that several of the buyers were interested in filing a class action suit for misrepresentation. The aftermath was glorious. The Whispering Pines board held an emergency meeting that night. By Sunday morning, Beatrice had been ousted as president. It turned out she had been using HOA funds to print those Phase 4 brochures without board approval, banking on the fact that she could bully me into selling before anyone. Notice the lake access was a lie. A week later, a new board member, a reasonable guy named David, came to my gate. He didn't try to climb it. He rang the bell I'd installed. "Mr. Miller," he said, looking at the orange monstrosity. "I'm the new HOA president." I wanted to apologize. Beatrice was, well, she was Beatrice. "We've scrubbed all mention of your lake from our materials." I looked at him for a moment. "I appreciate that, David. Is there any way," he asked tentatively, "that you'd consider taking down the orange paint? It's a bit bright." I smiled. "I'll tell you what. If you guys pay for the materials to build a nice cedar wood fence that actually follows the property line and keep your residents off my grass, I'll paint the gate black." "Deal," David said, shaking my hand through the bars. As he walked away, I looked out over Lake Serenity. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the water. The orange gate was an eyesore, sure, but it was a beautiful one. It was the physical manifestation of a boundary that should have been respected long ago. Beatrice ended up moving 6 months later. I heard she tried to sue the HOA for wrongful termination of her presidency, but the case was laughed out of court.